Hello everyone, it's Jin'Taan here, and I am joined with Suitonia. And today we're going to be talking about the patch that just dropped a couple of days ago, and that is the Rapid Fire patch that went live on the 26th of November. So, what are just your initial thoughts on it? Can you give us just a quick TLDR of what this patch means for the average player?
This patch is super cool because it's just a bunch of just really nice balance changes. There's nothing like super game breaking here or like mega game changing, but it's just just a set of tweaks to a bunch of ships that have kind of fallen on the wayside a little bit, as well as some buffs to autocannons, which is specifically medium autocannons, which had a reputation for being a little underpowered for a while.
We also got the introduction of the new precursor Dreadnought, let's not forget that.
Yeah, that's super amazing. Unfortunately, it also got nerfed today, so
Banged out immediately after launch because it was super broken or something in wormholes. I guess we'll talk about that when it comes to it. Entirely sure why it was so heavily nerfed.
yeah. Well, I mean, it did used to do 60k DPS with 500,000 alpha, so I mean, it was a little overpowered, but
Oh yeah, that's pretty spicy. So that's basically a doomsday every 7 seconds.
yeah. But now it's been nuked pretty hard, and a lot of people are a little upset about that.
Find a way for it because I can hear you breathing.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, fuck. I need to set up. There we go.
Awesome. Hopefully I'll remember to edit that out. So let's get into those balance changes though, first of all. And the first one up is the Stabber Fleet issue, which just gets a little bit of a buff. It gets an extra 2.5 rate of fire per level, which means it gets a 12.5% rate of fire bonus in total, which is actually a little more than a 12.5% damage bonus in reality because CCP maths.
Yeah, this has been deserved for quite a while. I think the Stabber Fleet issue is actually a ship I think I recommended for you to do on one of the videos that you've done previously in the last month, which was the 5 most underpowered ships in EVE Online.
Yeah, I think I put it like either fourth or fifth. Like it was a good ship. It still has its place, but it's just be something that was pretty good at everything, and now it's just very underwhelming at a lot of things.
Yeah, so the Stabber Fleet issue used to be a ship that was dedicated towards damage, but it didn't do that much damage at all. And in fact, the Sci Fleet issue used to actually do more damage than it. Because the Sci Fleet issue had 4 turrets, but then it had a 10% rate of fire bonus per level, so it has 8 in total. Whereas the Stabber Fleet issue had only 5 with a 5% rate of fire bonus, so it ended up having, I think, 6.66 effective turrets. So the Sci-Fleet issue effectively outdamaged it with way more utility, way more speed, and for a ship with all of its bonuses dedicated to damage, it just was a little lackluster. So I'm glad CCP buffed it.
I'm liking this just kind of like little tweak buffs though, nothing too intense here. We've not had like a massive speed buff to it. It's not had an entire role change. Like CCP is pretty comfortable with what the Stabber Fleet issue is trying to do. They just want to make it a little better at that role. And that's something we see in the same buff which is applied to the Tempest Fleet issue, which was also applied to the Tempest previously, if I remember correctly, and that it's also gained an extra 2.5 rate of fire per level.
Yeah, both the Stabber Fleet issue and the Timothy Fleet issue are picking up the bonus that was made to both the actual Stabber and the actual Tempest. I believe over the past like year or so. But yeah, that's a pretty big bonus actually, and the Tempest Fleet issue is still probably going to be one of those ships you don't really see all that often, just because Navy battleships are in kind of a weird place right now, right? Where they are still more expensive than pirate battleships, and they don't really do anything super differently because they're just better ships generically with more stats in most cases. So we probably won't be seeing like Tempest fleet issues everywhere. I do know that it is better than the Mac for armor fleets, but I'm not sure like how viable like armor battleship doctrines are in those tech right now. It's probably not very viable.
I've always had a particular place in my heart for what you were just talking about there, the armor fleet, Tempest fleet issue. It's the best like version of the ship of the line doctrine. Just the idea that you mass everyone up like the good old Victorian days and you just do fire by rank, and it's all very professional and very organized and very British. And anyone who knows me knows that I have absolutely tried to run Tempest fleet issues in most alliances I've joined because I have so much fun trying to make it work. That I just love this bonus. Like, it's probably not going to be enough to make them viable, but it's enough to make me want to try and make them viable, and that's all I need.
Yeah, and I'm sure the few people that do use them because it's cool, not because it's the best value, are gonna have fun with this ship.
Absolutely. Speaking of suboptimal ships that people are going to still have fun using, let's talk about the Typhoon, which has gotten a little bit of an application bonus.
Yeah, this is pretty cool actually. I think the battleship missile weapons struggle a little bit, particularly torpedoes. So it's nice that CCP's buffing cruise missile and torpedo explosion velocity on the Typhoon, so it'll have slightly better application. Most of the Typhoons I see generally have rapid heavies opposed to the battleship weapons, although I have seen some people try to use torps and cruises like Stitch Caneland.
Occasionally on like a fleet level. I know the Goons tried them during the First War North in like 2017 to be completely terrible in scale because all missile doctrines fail at scale. That's just how it works. But yeah, like this could be good. I know people are always going to try and make them work because they just have great paper DPS. They have such great, like, on paper, Typhoon looks awesome. It's got a really good armor tank, you've got some utility mids, you've got a newt high, like, it's kind of reasonably fast, it's pretty agile, it's hard to get bombed in. Everything looks really nice about the Typhoon on paper, and then you just fire a cruise missile and it takes literally half a minute to land in tie-dye, and you just wonder why the hell you even bothered.
Yeah, I've always liked the Typhoon. It's been a ship that it's not the ship that I've considered to be the weakest battleship in the game, but it certainly doesn't hurt to boost it, specifically for cruise and torpedo explosion velocity too, and rather than rapid heavies.
What do you think of the next buff that got handed out, which got an entirely new bonus added to it, which gives it a 7.5% per skill level bonus to explosion velocity for heavy missiles and hams, which is kind of doing the same thing, I guess, that you were talking about there with the Typhoon, trying to give it more of a reason to stick with those battleship level weapons. Here they seem to be trying to encourage the Bellicose to go to those cruiser-sized weapons, as right now most of the Bellicoses I see do use rapid lights because they're just designed to shred frigates.
Yeah, the Bellicose is kind of a weird ship, right? Because it has a split focus. It's both a E-War cruiser as well as a DPS cruiser. The Arbitrator is the same way too, except for I believe the Arbitrator is probably in like a much better spot than the Bellicose, just because drones, you know. But yeah, this is pretty cool, I think. And again, the CCP are trying to encourage it to use heavy assault missiles and normal regularly heavy missiles. It's actually a pretty strong application bonus. I wonder if you could maybe like slap a few heavy missiles on a bellicose now and kite with it with like a target painter or something.
I'm tempted to actually fly them on test them out on a fleets level. Like, they're now just straight up better heavy missile boats than the Caracal potentially, and I think that could have some interesting like PvP connotations. going to always engage you in a Bellicose fleet for at least the next 6 months. So if you can find a Bellicose fit that works really well against like the generic home defense cruiser fleets, so your Stabbers, your Caracals, maybe we'll see Mowers, and then you are going to probably get some good fights on people wanting to fight you in the first place, which is unfortunate because people can always just bring like Jackdaws or Hacks and just absolutely annihilate you.
Yeah, the problem the Bellicose used to have in the fleet context, right, is it's a jack of all trades. Like if you're talking about a Caracal fleet, if you want DPS, the Caracal is better in every way. And if you want target painters, then you're better off just bringing like Vigils or Hyenas or whatever cheap ship you can bring with the Caracal doctrine. But now that it has like a much better application bonus, this is probably equivalent to close to Caracal DPS now. So now the Bellicose is just kind of does almost Caracal DPS while also bringing a target painter. So even if you have like 4 or 5 Bellicoses, just so you have like 1 TP each on them, so you have like TP redundancy. I think that it might have a place now.
Check the stats, but I also think the Bellicose is relatively fast just because it's a Minmatar hull. I don't know if it outranges the Caracal, I assume not, but it might outspeed some of the other things.
Yeah, I believe it's actually faster than the Caracal. I think it goes like 2k a second ish, maybe 1 nano.
Interesting. We'll have to see how that develops. Obviously, it's going to be a test to the agility of some some organizations that kind of rely heavily on Caracals for home defense.
It might also be like a good new option for PvE for like new Mimitar characters now too.
Outside of my focus, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, it's kind of cool that there's like maybe like another option for combat cruisers other than just projectiles for Mimitars now.
This is a very Minmatar focused expansion, which is pretty cool actually. I like that. Doesn't feel like Minmatar have gotten a lot of love in a while.
At least since the sequel patch.
You mean the reign of the Zweeple for 18 months or whatever it was?
Yeah. Anyway, I guess we can probably move on to the most iconic ship in the game actually getting some love, which is the Rifter.
His favorite space dragster getting its bonus to rate of fire, bonus to damage dropped and replaced with a rate of fire per skill level bonus. And I did the maths on this, and this is about a 6.7 DPS increase.
Yeah, I actually thought it was more. I could be wrong though.
I mean, to be fair, you're normally better at this sort of thing than I am. That's roughly what I put it as.
Either way, to keep it simple, right? Like previously, it had 3 turrets and 25% bonus. So it had 3.75 effective turrets. Now it has 4.0 because rate of fire bonuses are calculated a bit differently. But 25% rate of fire is like equivalent to 33% DPS. So it's going from like 3.75 to 4.00 effective turrets, which is now it'll actually do the same damage as a Punisher fitted with all the cannons, which is nice.
The Punisher actually out-damaged it before then.
Yeah, it was like one of those things that was like kind of a little frustrating. I think the Rifter is like kind of in the same boat as like the Stabber fleet issue, right? In that it was like the best ship in the game to fly, like in 2009. And for frigates, the Rifter was like one of the only viable like Tech 1 frigates in the game, if not the only one.
Frigate I flew the most of in my first couple of years of the game because I came in around that period.
Yeah, and it has like obviously the other frigates got a bit more love, and it was kind of like a victim of power creep a little bit. It did get a buff recently where it dropped to the utility high for an extra low slot. Although that was a little controversial, but this is just nice. I think the Rifter is like good enough, and this just like makes it like it just makes it better, which is nice.
I don't really have much to argue about it. It feels like they tried to change the Rifter's role to be a little more of a heavy, like almost armor brawler. And I like that. I feel like it's good that they have the Rifter and the Breacher kind of fulfilling both sides of the Mimitar coin in that sense. You've got that shield missile, and you've got this armor autocannon.
Yeah, and then you also have the slasher for the like very low sig, like utility mid with a TD, like orbit tightly gameplay with the utility high, like nuke people out.
I gotta say that I just love like the very simple design of all of the frigates in Eve. Like it feels like most of them work in a really refined way, at least like the core 3 or 4 of each race.
Yeah, all of the frigates are like very well balanced. I don't think there is a single like Tech One frigate that I would say is like objectively bad.
Yeah. Well, speaking of things that are objectively bad, let's take a look at something objectively good. The Muninn, which has had some nerfs laid upon it from CCP. The only nerfs... Oh, sorry. One of the only 2 nerfs in this patch. And it's a lot of small changes. Its maximum speed's been nerfed, its signature radius has been nerfed, and its range has been nerfed. You know, I like all these changes. I think they're relatively good, but I do worry that this is just blunting the strengths of the Muninn rather than like trying to accentuate its weaknesses and give people more of a way to hit it down. It feels like they're doing to it what they did to the Ishtar, where they don't really address it that much. They just kind of shunt down its power level as much as they can until they finally realize, okay, we need to kill a slot off of it. Done. There we go.
Yeah, there isn't really like a specific focus to make it weaker in any like specific aspect. It is just like it's losing its speed is dropping from 250 to 235, which is about a like 6% nerf to speed, which isn't huge. Then they're also increasing the signature radius by about 9%. And then they're also just dropping the optimal range on the medium projectile turrets from 7.5% per level to from 10% per level. So it's losing a bit of range, a bit of speed, and the sig is increasing too, which means that it'll be a bit easier to track. Yeah, the nerf is a bit weird to me. It doesn't seem that focused, but then also Team Talos, they're focused on quick turnarounds. I mean, the Muninn has been OP for a while, so you'd think that maybe there would be like a little more, a few more ideas out there to nerf the Muninn specifically.
I mean, I've had a couple of ideas that I've definitely talked about. Do you want to talk about how would you? That's actually kind of an interesting thing because both of us agree just like these little buffs, but I want to know how would you have taken this Muninn nerf if you'd had the option to do it? Suit.
I'm not entirely sure, to be honest with you. Uh, I
If
don't
I am kind of
really.
putting you on your spot, aren't I?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an FC, so I don't really like understand too. Like, I know the problem with Munins that I've been told by other FCs is that they fire twice before armor rep cycles land. I think just the nerf to the optimal range is kind of okay. The velocity and the signature radius just seem a bit weird to me because it kind of feels like it's just making battleships and carriers better against the Munin.
I don't think that's not really enough to make them good against the Muninn anyway, because kind of a lot of the power in the Muninn is the fact that it can fight outside of web range and still effectively kill most armor support whilst doing so. 50, 60 Munins, and you're firing at like 80, 90 kilometers, you can probably kill off all your enemies' Lokis and then you can move in.
Yeah, so yeah, like I said, I like the range nerf because it forces them to go a bit closer. Increases the risk versus reward on the Munins. If you want to get that higher alpha that you need, then you need to go a bit closer, which means you have to risk going into web range a little more.
Plus, they can't adjust as quickly, and they're going to be easy to hit if they get into that kind of near web range where you're going to start to have paint supply to them. You're going to start to get a little more application down. To trade off against them if you can fight in that mid-range kind of sphere. Ultimately, I don't think the problem really was their skirmish ability. What this is really hitting, that's their ability to hit like outside of that skirmish engagement range, and their speed, which is their ability to disengage, which is definitely a problem actually. Like you can't really have doctrines that are as good as the Muninn was at disengaging because it makes FCs be super risk adverse. It's between bringing a doctrine where, okay, if I get headshot or like something bad happens, at least 80% of my fleet's going to survive, or a doctrine like, I don't know, like Apocalypses, or even to some degree Feroxes, where if I get in the fight and I actually commit to the fight and it goes to shit, all of my dudes are probably going to die. If you're looking at that kind of case, there's a natural tendency to go towards something like the Muninn, where you're always going to be able to disengage from a fight. You're going to be playing with a degree of safety, but I also don't think that you should be aiming for that specifically, because having an option where you can be a coward means that more people actually get involved in fights to begin with. You just need to have there be obvious counters to it, so people want to choose different things. My perspective on it, I'd probably hurt like the cap or something, or maybe the agility. So you can get on this grid and you can disengage, but people can still catch you out, and you can't stay on grid forever. Kind of go at it from that sort of an angle, make it so that it's not as viable for fighting at the 250 man scale, and that you can get away with it more when you're fighting these smaller skirmishy fights where other counters like healers already exist, which don't scale up as well.
Yeah, I mean, lock range could also be another like attribute they could nerf, right? I know like heavy assault cruisers have good lock range naturally, and that's sort of part of their like theme. But like if you needed like links and then maybe like like a rig or something to be effective at 90 kilometers, and it would also like nerf it down a bit if you want to stay at like max range.
One of the problems is just that there's not that many stats to tweak in Eve. Like, you think that there are a lot, but if you compare it to like a MOBA or some other game where you're going to have like a very active metagame, does have, you normally have a lot more little buttons to tweak. You can tweak things like, oh, how long is this unit gonna naturally resist status effects, or are they gonna take damage from this type of ship more than that type of ship? But in Eve, you can't really sit there and shift around the different resist types and give something a 5% resist buff, or take 5% more E-War damage, because we don't really have the tools to do that as standardized in the game. I think that would take an entire rework of basically the ship system. And whilst I think that could be kind of interesting, I don't think that CCP is going to go through it right now.
But yeah. I think the nerf is in the general right direction though.
Absolutely, it's good to see. The Muninn's been very powerful for a long time. I hope that this will probably see new things come into the sphere. But I imagine we'll probably just see Eagles do slightly better against them now, because they have an even stronger range advantage, and that's pretty much all they need.
Hey, Eagles are a lot slower though, so
Matter because the Munins can't stay on grid with them.
oh well, I know from being in We Form Volta, we used like Legion Doctrine with TDs to counter like Eagle Ferox Muninn doctrines, and they were pretty successful. And we actually have never had any like trouble against Eagles. We actually find them a lot easier to fight than Munins. So
I really like that Legion TD doctrine. I think it's one of the strongest. It's just really underused for some reason. I think just because it doesn't scale up particularly well. I'm not an expert on that.
yeah, and well, skill loss and cost too.
That definitely plays a role in it, especially in the larger wars, where you can't just bring out the same doctrine 3 times in a row. You need to do sometimes. Anyway, let's move off from that more heighty topic and onto the next nerf, which is to Angel Cartel ships in general, which, as a result of the previous buff that we had to overall warp speed in the game, have had their own bonus to warp speed and warp acceleration decreased to 25%. because I enjoyed zipping around the game in a really fast Dramiel. Got it?
Yeah, the Dramiel got sort of unnecessarily nerfed here, right? Because the Dramiel didn't get buffed by the warp speed changes, but the Cinnaball and the Macarial did. So yeah, the Dramiel the Dramiel maybe could use a little bit of love.
I feel like the it was still a fairly good ship. Like, I've always struggled against it whenever I've come up against it in solo PvP, but that might just be because people who fly Dramiels are actually good at the game and I'm not. No?
Yeah, the Dramiel's a good ship. There's just a bit of salt, I guess, around it, but I mean, it's still going to be a really good ship.
Yeah, I guess it kind of nerfs that like weird Cinnable Windrunner concept that I've been seeing a lot of. That was
Yeah,
like
the
particularly
Cinnable was
cancerous.
crazy. It warped at like 6 AU a second, which is like faster than like interdictors and assault frigates naturally. And I think if you went like one Tech 2 Nano, one Tech 2 Poly, you warped to your line time was under 3 seconds too. So you literally got places faster than frigate gangs.
Yeah, I was seeing people use them in Brave Space and Horde Space all the time. Like, they'd just be running that exact thing, but they'd be just zipping around a gate to like pre-bookmarked things and just sniping at sniping at these frigates. And I was just like, wow, that's really cool, but also very gross.
Yeah, and the Macario actually got like a huge buff to PVE because it warped at 4.5 AU a second after the patch,
Oh, I didn't think of
which
that.
is the same as a Tech 2 cruiser.
So I bet you were making bank then, because that's a lot of the time in a battleship normally.
Yeah, the Mac was super good, but now with the nerf, it's still going to be faster, right? So that's still 3.75 AU a second, which is still faster than like a heavy assault cruiser was pre warp speed patch.
And then we got the autocannons in general, and we have a medium autocannon buff, and I'm so happy about this. And you have both asked for this repeatedly. It's just a little bit of a rate of fire buff and a little bit of a fall off buff to medium autocannons. That's probably all they need, in my opinion.
Yeah, this is a nice little tweak. I don't think they need like medium autocannons need massive amounts of buffs, like a lot of people seem to think. I think they were in a somewhat okay place. They just needed to be pushed up a bit, and this definitely does that, especially with the ammo changes too.
Happy to report that with this change, a Blaster Brutix no longer out DPSs a barrage firing Hurricane.
Oh, like 20 kilometers or something.
4 kilometers, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, this is cool. Just generally nice.
And then we have the old related nerfs to Barrage and Hail being undone, which is good. I'm happy about that.
Yeah, one of the problems with in the patch that CCP introduced the Super, I think it was the Tiamat expansion. They actually buffed all of the base fall off on all of the guns by 10%, but then they nerfed barrage down by 10%. But in doing that, they like decreased the amount of like times where it's valuable to load barrage. Like the level of space that you have to where like barrage is going to be objectively better to load than EMP or phase plasma just like went down a lot. And so just, buffing barrage back up to 50% is nice because it means that there's going to be more situations where loading barrage is going to be worth having.
There were like some changes to the ADCs, and this isn't technically a nerf if I'm reading it correctly. So I just want to make sure I understand this. The cooldown is also reduced by 10% as well as the activation time, right?
No, it's just the duration and the activation time. It's like the same attribute.
Oh, I thought that went the like cooldown. I feel dumb.
I'm pretty sure they still have the same activation timer. But yeah, I think assault damage controls have a 15-second cycle time on Tech 2, right? And this reduces it down to like 13.5 seconds.
Yeah, it's something like a 1.5 second reduction or something like that. The actual length. It's not a huge change, but again, it's going to be something. It's going to make hacks slightly less powerful in a fleet setting because they're no longer going to have battleship EHP for 10 seconds. They're going to have it, well, for 15 seconds ish.
Yeah, and assault frigates were a bit powerful in 1v1s. You know, they were definitely like pushing T3Ds and destroyers out in FW and like in solo PvP. And also, again, this is just another thing, right? That like hits the Muninn and then also kind of hits the Eagle, which is the natural replacement to the Muninn. So just overall a good change, I think.
We also got a couple of new features and modules and stuff like that, so we'll go through that as well. And shareable bookmarks are kind of interesting, I guess. It's not the kind of thing I deal with directly very often, but from what I see, it's going to make wormhole navigation kind of a lot easier. So that's good, because fuck wormholes.
Yeah,
Please don't shit my Cheerios. I love you.
it's okay. Pharaoh's not a real wormhole, so I still love you, Jin. But it does potentially make things like sharing, yeah, like sharing wormhole chains with your own alliance a lot easier, right? Instead of having to have like a guy in your corp copy it over to like the 4 other guys in your corp. Like if you had like 5 corps in your alliance, now you can just have like an alliance bookmark list. You don't have to like copy pings or do any of this stuff either. You can also just have like, you know, temporary tacticals that you can just share with everyone in fleet, including like ults. So a lot of time when you're back probing, right, you don't want to use like a character in your alliance because it makes it like super obvious like who's trying to like back probe into their space. I think for wormholes and timers, it also makes it like a lot easier to like bat phone people, if you know what I mean. Like if my wormhole was under attack and I want you to, you know, bring Trigger Happy to come save me, Jin, right? Like before I would have to like bookmark the wormhole chain, then physically go to a station where you are or like one of your FCs are or something, and then copy those bookmarks over to that FC. Then that FC then needs to put the bookmarks into his corp and then you know copy it again and give it to like other corps in your alliance. Now you can just like give him access to your wormhole chain, and then he can just like immediately just just put his guys into the ACL, and then you have the bookmarks immediately. So it saves like a lot of the like the just unnecessary time to like help get people in.
Make wormholes like a lot more accessible. Especially, I'm really hoping they don't make like this kind of NPSI wormhole based content. The stuff like Dead Terrorists and Marshy do, like a lot more viable. Kind of looking forward to trying to get into some of that in the near future. Like I definitely want to give it a go. So if shareable bookmarks make that kind of thing easier, I'm all for it. Because I think people, smaller groups need more tools that don't rely on massive organizations hanging over their head. Restrict to big organizations, the less fun the game is, because the less powerful small organizations are. There you go, that's my rant.
This is probably just, I think, the number one requested quality of life change ever since CCP put corp bookmarks into the game. So it's great that they're finally here.
I asked for Alliance bookmarks, and CCP did us one better, so I'm all for that. It's not often we get that. More than we asked for in the EVE community.
Yeah. So I guess we can move on to some new modules. Well, they're not really modules; they're the implants. That's the Tech 2 high grade. I call them the meme sys implants. But yeah, the CCP have just added like a higher grade set to the mimesis implants, which increase the Triglavian maximum spool, but they lower the amount you gain per cycle. So essentially, they slow down your ramp but increase the ramp.
So, are they any good?
I thought they were okay, but very situational. Then CCP pre-nerfed them, so I thought they were horrible. However, the high grade implant set I think is useful in some situations now. The big problem with them, right, was the opportunity cost of using them. Like I could use this mimesis implant set that makes my Leshak actively worse unless I'm shooting the same target for 3 minutes. Or I could, just have slaves on my Leshak, or just have snakes on my Leshak, which are just always objectively good. And they're good on other ships too, right? Not just the Leshak. If I board a damnation or something, the slaves are still going to be useful to me.
And then we got all the modules that are going on the new Trig Dreadnought and the stuff to build it. Which is pretty cool. Extra large disintegrator. It looks fucking rad if you've seen it in game.
Yeah, it looks really cool.
CCP's art department still the most like swole part of CCP. No matter what's going on, CCP's art department always batting like 100.
Yeah, CCP's art is always amazing.
I mean, neither of us are really industry people, so we don't have much to say about this.
We're not really like mission people either, so
Go listen to Matt Ross' podcast if you want some of that. Sorry, Meryl. So then we get the new content, which is Concord setting up the Triglavian stellar accelerator observatories, which is a whole thing. We had these stellar accelerator sites added during the last part of the invasion chapter 1, and basically they're things that the Triglavians are setting up around stuns, and apparently they might suck the suns into Triglavian space, so it's your duty as a capsuleer to go and shoot them so that they don't do that, because that would be bad. But you can also choose to betray them now and just stab the Empires in the back and be like, hell yeah, triangles. Triangles are my jam.
yeah, it's actually really cool. I think this is one of the things that I really wanted to see when they put the like the agency events in the game before they like made it agency. It's like it would be cool if there was like like two different sides and maybe like unique rewards for both sides. Because I know when CCP puts like events in like kill Amarian slavers, there's a lot of like Amarian RPers that are like just sitting there smiling.
When CCP were regularly doing the kind of like lore events, like the Guardian Gala and all of that, I pitched the idea to the live events team of having something like this, where you go through the dungeon, and then at the end of the dungeon, you get a choice between doing room A and room B, and that has lore impacts going down the line. And I think what we're seeing here is something along a similar vein, and I imagine CCB is going to be keeping track of what you actually do. So it's going to be interesting to see what the community does overall. Like, do people choose to, on average, work with the Empires, or do they choose to work with the Triglavians? I imagine it's going to be more Triglavians, because EVE players, I think, tend to think of themselves as bad people and are more likely to help the bad side, as opposed to, say, the World of Warcraft, where Alliance content is always historically been way more played than Horde content.
Well, and every expansion, the Horde and the Alliance team up now, so to deal with the new big bad.
I don't actually play World of Warcraft. I'm sorry, I don't know that shit.
I don't know either.
So I'm glad we're shitting on a game we don't play. Very good, everyone. If you enjoy World of Warcraft, you're lame. Also got a login campaign added to new players, which is interesting. Like, I think that's a pretty industry standard thing now, but it's cool to see them trying stuff. Not complaining about it.
Some of the prototype screenshot did make me laugh though. It's got a Tech 1 neutron blaster and it's got like epic loot on it or something, and it's like highlighted in blue.
Never saw that. That's great.
I don't know, but yeah, it's just cool, just helping keep the new players into the game.
And then it goes into a big spiel about the Sinatra with all the bonuses. Do you want to just give us the highlights? How ridiculously broken it was and how unbroken it is now.
Yeah, so the Sinatra used to do 22,000 DPS before it even spooled up, with better tracking than the Capital autocannons. And it could spool potentially up to 60k DPS, which is, about 6, Dread Bomb Naglfar's worth of DPS, which is a bit insane, really. And now it's been nerfed down by about 66%. So now I think it does, I think it's 6k before spool, and it goes up to about 22k. So now it starts out as noticeably worse than all the other dreadnoughts. Like I think a Revelation and a Naglfar do about 10 to 11k, depending on the guns and if it's a dread bomb or like an actual fitted like Tech 2 dread or not. So now Revs and Naglfars will actually be a lot better than it, as long as as long as like ships are dying to them. Like I think like in under 2 minutes or so.
I think we did the maths on it, and it actually takes until like 8 minutes for it to be worth it.
Oh yeah, yeah. Is that with the high grade meme implants?
Someone might have been looking at that with meme
Yeah,
implants, just thinking they make it better.
Yeah, I saw someone post on Reddit that if you have like the high grade mimesis implants, it takes 7.5 seconds for it. So 7.5 minutes for it to like get more DPS than a nag, like over time. Like not DPS, I mean like damage over time.
Fair enough. That's probably correct. I don't know maths properly yet. The graph, and I was like, wow, that looks awful.
Needless to say, it was broken OP before. Now it seems reasonable, but reasonable is maybe a little anticlimactic for the new Triglavian Dreadnought that everyone's been like hyped up about for months.
Yeah, I'd rather they introduce something that's reasonable and buff it up to be good, rather than having it break the fucking game when it's released, so that rich people can ruffle stomp, and then by the time plebeians get their hands on it, it sucks ass.
Yeah, what's kind of interesting with this one is that CCP's changed the tracking on it to be like the long range gun equivalent.
Because I thought there could have been something really interesting with that, like the Neo tracking dread concept is particularly bad because it does take it takes even more effort than it used to take to make a tracking dread work now.
Yeah, I mean you basically need like vigilant and like infilling Tugin support, right, for it to even work. So
Unless you're shooting like, you know, still 200 kilometers away, which I have done. You are going to need so much support to make it work. Even at that, even shooting like no prop ravens moving at like 200 to 300 kilometers away, you still needed multiple paints to make that work.
yeah, hopefully CCP can take a look at it again, maybe, and give it back some power. I think with what they have now, if they buffed it up by like 20-25%, I think it'll probably be in a good place.
I don't want to give numbers to it. I feel like it can definitely use some buffs, but I'm sure CCP will be aware of that and they'll be looking at it for the next patch, It's not like we got to wait 6 months for them to do a patch. We've got one coming 2 weeks, and we know what we got one coming in 2 weeks, and that's great. Interface stuff, we got a ton of little stuff that doesn't really matter. Basically nothing that is going to affect you unless you are a PV player is changing.
Yeah, and then we have the logging campaign that we already mentioned. There's specifically one that just started today at downtime, which is Black Friday campaign. You get some free skill points and boosters, which is cool. You get Quaith. If you're hoarding Quaith, sell it now because it's gonna crash in price.
Sell it now because it's already crashed. I already checked.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You need to hold on to it for 2 years for it to
Buy hodl hodl hodl.
Yeah, another way is we are just on the defect fixes now. There is one defect fix that I think is worth mentioning. It's not really a defect. Well, it is a defect fix, but it has like big balance implications, and that's the fact that they fixed the issue where the entropic disintegrator, the like spool up bonus itself, was actually being counted towards stacking penalties. So now, if you're fitting like multiple entropic heat sinks on a Triglavian ship. So specifically, this is probably going to affect like Hikimuras and Leshaks and Ikikursas the most because they were the ships that generally fitted like multiple heat sinks. They are going to get even more damage, which is kind of crazy.
It's going to be fun to see what happens there. Do you have any final comments before we wrap up this little bit of patch notes?
Yeah, I actually really like this patch. I mean, if we get something like this every 2 weeks, I think it's going to be great. If we just get like 26 of these every year, maybe they miss a few here and there because of holidays and other commitments. Like if we could get 20 of these patches a year, I'd be super happy.
Pretty much said the exact same thing when I talked to Rise earlier today, so I'm glad to hear we're in agreement on that. If you want to hear the patch notes as they're written read out, you can do so on my channel. I'll put a link to that in, I guess, the comments or something. Please make sure to subscribe to Suitonia's channel because I know he'll be too embarrassed to shill it himself. He's trying to build up this thing. Let's make it as big as Eve is easy because it's going to be the same Suitonia face in a new Suitonia place.
So make sure to follow Jin'Taan on Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, Venmo. I don't know. You can't follow people on that, can you?
Alright, well, have a wonderful day, everyone, and fly smart.